This is my first iPhone. I've basically been Android my entire life since it's been out and since I bought my first one. So how's life on the other side? Is it actually greener or is it worth staying in the Android ecosystem because I've been in here so long? Stick with me as I review the iPhone 16 Pro and go over some of the differences that I've noticed while using iOS and if it's worth really giving it a shot. So first, let's start off with what's new with the iPhone 16 Pro. The first one I'm going to mention is Apple Intelligence. Now, unfortunately, I still don't have it on this phone. When I click on Siri or hold for Siri, I still just get the regular Siri. I don't get that glowing screen with the Apple Intelligence. So it's not really something I could talk about, but based on what I've seen on the keynotes and some of the demos that I've seen from some people that have been able to try it out, it looks pretty great. It's probably one of the better ones, if not the best AI that I've seen from these phones. It integrates really well from what it looks like. Obviously, it could be different once we try it, but it's looking pretty good. The second thing is the dedicated button for the camera. So this one is kind of a mixed bag. The fact that it has a dedicated button for the camera is a plus for me because for me, the camera is very important on a phone and I want to be able to access it quickly. Having the button that you single press to bring up the camera is huge, and I wish every phone had that, honestly. Now, when it comes to the gestures on the button, that's somewhat gimmicky. I haven't seen it be useful, and when I actually try it, even though it does work and is pretty smooth, it's just easier to use the screen itself instead of using the half press to bring up the menu or the slider and then start sliding your finger on it. It's a bit cumbersome, maybe not the part of the phone or the button that I would use the most. I would just use the clicking to bring up the camera. It also lets you take a photo with the press of a button, which is okay, I guess. It's not any different than using the volume button. It does introduce some additional movement, which is not good for pictures, obviously, especially in low light. You're going to introduce blur into the photo. But if you're in an awkward position, like sometimes I'm in a very low angle and I can't really see a screen all that well, it'll come in handy there because I could just look at the top of the phone and press the button. But other than that, in those unique cases, you're just better off using the screen. It's going to be faster. It's going to be more crisp. You're not introduce any additional movement, and it's just a better experience. But I still like that Apple is even trying it, and I hope they do keep it, even if they remove some of the features or change the way it works somewhat. The button itself is actually pretty cool, though. And the third difference that I've noticed is the camera for the telephoto lens is a 5x now. On the iPhone 15, they introduced the 5x on the Pro Max, but they left it as a 3x in the Pro. They gave an excuse about not having enough space or something, but guess what? It is the same size and it has a 5x now, so yeah, it seems like a cop-out to me. Normally, Apple keeps the Pro series exactly the same, except just a different size and battery capacity because of just the dimensions. So I was pretty surprised when they went with the 15 Pro with two different camera systems. On the competition side though, Google is actually doing the same thing now. Maybe Samsung will come up and do that eventually, but for now Samsung is kind of out of the game on this one. Next, I want to talk about the price and the options for when you're buying the 16 Pro. And the starting price is $999, which is perfectly fine, but then the starting storage is 128 gigabytes. I said it with the Pixel 9 Pro where it's just not acceptable anymore. Of course, Apple has their own ecosystem and their own market, so they don't have to follow the same rules as Android, or they don't have to give any sort of discounts, basically. That's kind of what it is. So that by them keeping it at 128 is perfectly fine. They could get away with it. Now, just because they get away with it doesn't mean that they should be doing it. I just think that in today's phones, 128 gigabytes for a Pro Series phone is just not enough. You have the capability of either 8K 30 or 4K 120 in most phones. And then you're taking full res photos at 48 or even 200 with Samsung. You have to be at 256 minimum to even keep up with those photo sizes nowadays. But besides the storage, everything else is pretty much okay at $1,000. It's with today's market, even on the Android side, it's not much different. So the pricing is all right, and they just need to boost the storage. The other thing that if you're coming from Android that you got to keep an eye out is that when you're upgrading storage for Apple, it's a lot more expensive than if you're upgrading storage for Android. I think Apple is just taking advantage of their name, and I mean, they can do it, so why not? But I think they're overcharging for storage. But now I want to move on to the build quality and the design of the phone, because this is where Apple really shines. I mean, ever since they came out in the market with the original iPhone, and even before that with the iPods, design is like their number one thing to get right, and they always get it right. No exceptions here. The first thing I want to mention, just the attention to detail, even the buttons themselves, they have zero play. Doesn't matter what I do, there's no movement from side to side, up or down. It's just, it only goes where it needs to go, pressed in, straight downward, and that's it. With Samsung and the Pixel 9 series, they really improved it to a point where it's not much different. But that small attention to detail there is what makes Apple Apple. The customizable mute button is great. I really do like it. The switch worked fine. I actually prefer the button though. And you're not going to press it by mistake because you actually have to hold it for like a second or two before it activates. So it's a really good design and good programming on the software side to make sure you don't do it by mistake. Next, I want to talk about the color options. So with the Pro, there aren't really that many that are, attention grabbing. They're mainly on the plain side. I think they're actually, it's like basically black, white, silver, and then this one right here, which they're calling desert. This is basically rose gold. At night, it looks a bit darker. It actually looks a bit brownish at night, but when it's lit up well, to me, it looks just like rose gold. It's very nice, but it looks different on pictures than it does in person. So I actually like the color. It came out really nice, and it's probably the best color in the lineup this year. Now let's move on to the cameras. I compared this one to the Google Pixel 9 Pro and the Samsung S24 because in terms of size, that's what really compares. And this has the largest sensors from the three. Seems like a pretty big gap, especially when you're comparing the S24. The Pixel is like in the middle, but I mean, they're all large sensors at this point and they all take pretty good pictures. The pictures that come out of the phone are great. They're crisp. They have some nice options to create your own tone so that you're taking the picture with the tone curve already applied basically, rather than having to do it afterward. And of course, when it comes to video, iPhone is the best one at the moment. The Pixel 9 Pro is claiming to be the best one. I would like to test that, but I'm thinking that they're claiming that based on video boost. And to me, that's kind of not exactly straight out of the camera. So I can't call the Pixel 9 Pro the best one if that's the case. One thing I noticed while using the camera app is that there aren't too many modes, and that's perfectly fine. The ones that it does have, they all work great, and that's what matters to me. Having these phones with like 20 something modes it doesn't really matter, and you can't master all of those modes either as a user or as a software company to be able to make them as good as possible. I think less is more in this situation, and the fact that the ones that they have in here all work great is what really matters. Now, the one thing that I didn't like about the camera app is the gestures to go to the next camera mode. And with the iPhone 16 Pro, or pretty much any Apple, I imagine, you're limited to swiping one mode at a time, and to me that's too slow and kind of annoying. So now let's move on to security, and this is another thing that Apple does really well, but there's a downside to it as well. So with Apple, you have Face ID, which is amazing. It's the best one I've used, even better than Google's, which is the best one on Android. And I mean, it doesn't really matter what the lighting is like. It doesn't matter if you have glasses on or not, and there's even an option to use it with a mask. It doesn't matter what the situation is, the Face ID just works and works consistently. And that's the best thing that Apple has in terms of the security part of it. Now, the downside to this system is that you have a larger notch in the screen. It's not terrible, but it does interfere if you do anything full screen. I bet if you ask iPhone users if that notch is worth having Face ID, 99% of them are going to say yes. So, I mean, you just live with it if you're an iPhone user. Now let's move on to the software. And Apple, again, attention to detail, they make everything work very smooth with iOS. The OS itself is very efficient. The fact that they do so much with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and that's just recently upgraded, is amazing. And I don't think that Android can do that, mainly because of the way the platforms are designed. So yeah, that's Apple's thing, being very efficient. The fact that their battery life is either the best or up there at least with the best of similar sized phones goes to show that they are very efficient even in their battery, not just the RAM usage, but also the battery usage, because these phones have smaller batteries than their Android counterparts. And when using the software, everything about it is ultra smooth. Everything works great, never any hiccups. It just works and it's very reliable. They recently added the ability to change your icon's colors, and it's more of a overall theme for the entire phone, sort of. And I gotta tell you, it actually looks pretty cool. I think it came out really nice, and everything kind of becomes like the same color, kind of like a, it's almost like monochrome in a way, but with a different color that you chose. So it's not the same as what's on Android where only the icons change. It looks like even the widgets change here and everything, and it just looks very nice. I'll show you a quick glimpse of mine. I think it looks pretty cool. I went with a greenish tone because my wallpaper is a white car with a greenish background, and to me, it looks very nice. I've heard some complaints about the way it looks, that it doesn't look all that great because it just looks like an overlay on the app's colors, but I think it looks perfectly fine to me. Now, the one thing that Apple hasn't really done all too well is the ability to customize your home screen and other parts of the phone. It's not all that smooth. So I've been trying to keep my setups very similar between the phones so that when I pick one up, I'm not searching for the apps. I know where they are because all the phones have a similar layout. So I was doing that with the iPhone, copying my Z Fold 6's setup. It just felt very clunky when I tried to add an app to a folder. It feels like if you didn't align it perfectly and quickly, it just moved the folder into a different location, and then you're placing it just plainly on the home screen instead of in the folder. With Android, they give you like an extra second to put it on there before it moves the app, and makes it a bit easier when you're trying to put things into a folder. But I don't know, it just feels a little bit clunky when compared to Android in terms of setting up the home screen how you want it. The other thing that I truly miss from Android is the universal back gesture, or the back button. So with Apple, with the apps, if you're in an app and you went in like one layer deep, you can't swipe from the left to go back to the layer above it. So it is sort of like a back gesture, but if you are in the main or the top level of the app and you go and do the back gesture, nothing happens. With Android, if you're on the top level of the app and you do the back gesture, it closes the app. So it kind of, behaves how you would want it. You want to keep going back, and the next logical step to go back is just to go to the home screen and close the app. Going on to the keyboard, I feel like there's very little customization when it comes to the keyboard. I'm a big fan of having the number row on top of the keyboard, and there's no option for that on iPhone. So every time I want to type a number, I have to click on the symbols button to look for the number, and that's just a pain in the butt. But as far as functionality, the keyboard is great. I mean, one of the best that I've used. Gboard is up there, obviously. Samsung has gotten way better, and this is up there with Gboard in terms of how accurate it is, and the autocorrect is really good on this as well. Which these are things that I expect from Apple, so it's not surprising, but it's expected and it delivers. So overall, my experience with the iPhone 16 Pro was as good as it gets, and it's expected. It's an Apple. And it makes sense why so many people, jump to iPhone or stick with iPhone, because they're just premium all the way around. And with the software, it's one of those things that I feel like the one that you start with is probably gonna be your favorite. Very few times is someone gonna switch and like the other one better, because they just get used to the gestures and all these different settings and everything. In terms of hardware though, there's no mistaking that this is the best that's out there. You have Samsung and Google that are basically just as good, with only small things that Apple does a bit better. But I would say on equal playing ground at this point. Let me know in the comments below if you would be willing to switch to the other side and give it a whirl. And if not, what's your biggest hurdle? Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.